So coming up this Thursday is going to be the final round of fights for the first round of the PFL 2025 tournament. And if you haven't been watching the tournament, I do recommend that you check in because I think that this year we genuinely have had some of the better cards that PFL has been putting on, especially for what you could call the preliminary fights where we are just getting through the first round of guys to see who can make it into the semi-finals in this 8-man bracket of challenges. And this one here is going to be a light heavyweight and heavyweight card, and you know what that means. It's either going to be one of the best cards we've ever seen, or it's going to be one of the worst cards we've ever seen. But one thing that we do guarantee with the big guys is that they are going to be the big guys, so we definitely can expect at least a couple of finishes on this card. I'm going to make this one pretty quick. I actually have an exam on Thursday that I need to study for, so we'll just kind of get through this fight card relatively quickly. But if you did want to read an article that I have written on this card, check it out on the We Want Picks website. If you do sign up to the We Want Picks website and use my code ARTEM, you do get 10% off your first membership, and obviously with that you do get access to so many things like Angelo and Jacob's bets, BetSam's premium bets, my articles, as well as a bunch of other stuff that can help you make your own bets, as well as notes and an AI prediction and stuff like that. There's so much on that website, man, and you probably know Angelo tells you all of that all the time. So let's get into the fights. The first of 9 fights here. I believe this is the alternate matchup for 205 pounds. Alex Polizzi taking on Rafael Xavier. To break down this fight simply, it's a striker versus wrestler matchup. Alex Polizzi is a wrestler. He wants to shoot for takedowns as much as he possibly can. This guy just is non-stop shooting for takedowns, so he just doesn't stop doing it. However, he is going to have a pretty tough time fighting against Xavier because Xavier is a very talented striker. He does use range very well despite being 6'1" at 205 pounds. And he hits very hard. He has a lot of finishes early, and he does have a lot of power early. Now, the cardio is a little bit of a problem. He can slow down towards the end of the fight, but he did nearly knock out Simeon Powell in the first round of that fight. If there was a few more seconds on that clock, potentially Xavier could have got a finish there, and that would have been a big win over Simeon Powell, who was also on this card. However, I am going to pick Alex Polizzi in this matchup. Now, it isn't just as simple as saying Alex Polizzi is going to win because he's the wrestler, because I'll be honest, at this point, Alex Polizzi has taken so much damage in his career. It's unbelievable. This guy, he just doesn't have very good striking defense. He's been knocked out a few times now. Yoel Romero gave him a horrific jaw injury now, and he's continued fighting, and he's, been getting hurt on the feet. He got knocked out by Impas Kasanganay. I think Polizzi can survive the first round, and once he does that, the takedowns are going to be pretty easy for him to get in round 2 and 3. So I'm picking Polizzi to win a decision based on the second and the third round in this fight. But Polizzi is a pretty big favorite. I think he's minus 255. As you can see, I wasn't prepared. He's minus 230 right now at the time of me recording this. I think he does get it done by decision. And we move up to the first of many UFC heavyweights making their debut on this PFL card. Rodrigo Nascimento, of course, was in the UFC recently. I believe he was released from the promotion after his loss to Romanov, and Romanov is also on this PFL card as well. Now, I will be honest, although Nascimento wasn't the most exciting guy in the UFC, it definitely is an odd decision for them to have cut him so early, I will be honest, because Rodrigo Nascimento headlined an event against Derek Lewis less than a year ago. He was a main event fighter for the UFC, but I guess they just kind of gave up on him, and now he's taking on Abraham Babley, who I will admit is probably one of the best heavyweight prospects out there right now. I will be honest though, he does definitely look quite undersized out there at times. He is 5'10", and he does look like a guy that probably could fight potentially as low as 185 pounds, and he's weighing into these matchups at 240 pounds, 250 pounds. But he's got a good skill set, Babley is a wrestler, and I would say the wrestling's very good. He does shoot for takedowns often, he can chain takedown attempts together, and he can defend takedowns quite well. Where I think he's actually going to hold an advantage here against Nascimento is the boxing. I think he's a very talented guy with the hands. He does close the distance quite well. Now, of course, he is going to look a bit small in there against the 6'2" Nascimento, but I think that we can see Babley find some success there with the hands if he can keep the fight on the feet, and I think he can as the underdog. And it's also worth noting that Babley did just fight Slim Trabelsi, who is one of the most talented guys at heavyweight in general, and just out of the prospects, arguably is one of the best prospects at heavyweight in the world. And you could argue that Babley won that matchup. It was a close one. Babley's the underdog right now against Nascimento, and we'll see how the matchup goes. I'm picking Babley to win in this fight. Now we have Sullivan Cauley fighting against Marcelo Nunes. This is a very interesting fight because Nunes is a former heavyweight, 36 years old, moving down to 205 pounds for this year's tournament. And Sullivan Cauley hasn't fought for a year and 8 months now, I believe. You know, the last time he fought was in 2023, but he is a very big time finisher for this weight class. He has a lot of first round finishes. Most of his wins actually happen to be in the first round and by knockout. He did show a little bit of a grappling weakness against the 6'6" Luke Trainer, who was able to submit him in the first round, but aside from that, it's been all systems go for Cauley, who's been getting a lot of knockout victories in his career. Marcelo Nunes is a grappler. He is I'll be honest, he's got a lot of wins in the PFL, but he just really isn't that impressive. He hasn't really been fighting the better guys at the PFL's heavyweight division, and now that he's 36, moving down to 205 pounds, I think it's a very interesting career move. And honestly, I think that in this matchup, despite Nunes definitely having a grappling advantage, the weight cut at this point in his career is just very confusing to me because he wasn't very fast at 265 pounds. I think that's kind of going to be the big one here because he's 36. He's a slow heavyweight, which means he's going to be an ultra slow light heavyweight. And Cauley hits hard. Cauley's a big guy for 205 pounds. He's been trained with Ryan Bader a lot recently, which could maybe work on his takedown defense a bit. And as long as the fight's on the feet, I think that Nunes is going to give Cauley the opportunities to knock him out. So I'm picking Sullivan Cauley, and I'm picking Sullivan Cauley to win by KO. I actually think that Cauley is a favorite in this matchup. Minus 160 on Bet Online. I think that's a bit wide, I will be honest, but I do think Cauley gets it done by KO in this fight. And now we have another UFC heavyweight making his PFL debut. Of course, this one is now Karl Williams. His UFC departure was sparked with a bit of controversy because he was apparently told by the promotion that if he didn't strike more, he was going to get released, and then they gave him a glory kickboxer, and then he striked with Janata Deniz for 2 rounds and lost those 2 rounds on the feet, obviously. So that was very odd, I will be honest, but he's taking on Oleg Popov, and the thing about Oleg Popov is he is very one-dimensional. Oleg Popov genuinely relies on his chain wrestling, but the thing about that chain wrestling is it is very good. He got signed to Bellator when I believe he was, he had like a 15-1 record or so, and he's just looked good the whole way through. Beating Steve Mowry by finish with ground and pound in that dominant position is very impressive, and he made it all the way to the finals. He did get subbed by Goltsov pretty quickly, but before that he was looking very dominant, and I think in this matchup, despite Karl Williams showcasing very good wrestling against a former D1 wrestler in Jimmy Lawson, aside from that, he's only ever fought strikers, and I think that in this matchup, he's taking on a wrestler, and I think Oleg Popov is going to go out there and try and get the takedowns against Karl Williams, and I think he can get them in this fight. So I'm going to go with Oleg Popov to win this fight by decision. Another thing as well is this is very short notice. I am pretty confident this fight was only announced either a day, maybe 2 days ago, and, that's in 3 days right now at the time of me recording this video. Maybe 2 days from the time of me recording this video. So Williams has not really had any notice at all, and there's no odds for this matchup, but I do think Popov is going to be the favorite. Now we've got another UFC heavyweight, of course. This one is Alexandr Romanov this time around, and I'll be honest, if Alexandr Romanov does not go out there and get a first-round finish over Tim Johnson, I will be disappointed. This is the kind of matchup that Romanov excels in. Romanov made his name in the UFC by just getting these pretty easy matchups like Chase Sherman, Roque Martinez, who was one of the worst heavyweights to ever fight in the promotion, Marcos Rogério de Lima, a first-round finish over him is impressive. So when he takes on these lower level guys, he gets the quick finishes. And Tim Johnson, at this point in his career, he's definitely had the best days behind him. He is 40 years old now. He's pretty slow. He fought Denis Goltsov on short notice. He fought Vadim Nemkov on short notice, which I'm sure is why he's getting this opportunity here. But I just think at this point in his career, man, we've seen Tim Johnson taken down and dominated back to back by various talented wrestlers. And Romanov, despite, some people not really thinking he's the best, is a very talented, dominant wrestler. And I honestly think that it's somewhat confusing that the UFC cut him, because I think there's a fair argument that Romanov's a top 25, top 20 heavyweight in the world. And heavyweight is very short on talent in the UFC right now. So they probably could have used Romanov, to be honest. But I think that the fact that the PFL now has him, it's going to be good for Romanov's career because he gets to fight Tim Johnson. This is a big step down in competition for Romanov. And I'm expecting a first round submission or TKO in this matchup. Now, Karl Albrektsson fights against Simeon Powell. This is one of the harder fights to call on the card, I will be honest, but I am still going to side with Simeon Powell in this matchup by knockout. Before you do, just go out there and put money on Simeon Powell, because I think a lot of people will be surprised that Simeon Powell in this matchup is only minus 165. There's a couple of things that I need to say. Simeon Powell was the man. He was the PFL Europe superstar. He was looking incredible. He was getting knockout wins, and he was looking great. But then he took a step up in competition against Jakub Nedor, and Jakub Nedor just completely shut him down in that fight. And the way that he did that was pressuring him and just moving him backwards, and eventually Simeon Powell just kind of stopped throwing punches, and Nedor knocked him out. After that, he then fought Rafael Xavier, who's on the first fight of this card, and as I said, Rafael Xavier nearly knocked him out in the first round. Simeon Powell very much relies on his size, his speed, his power, and his athleticism. He doesn't really have much of a game plan when he does go into fights. He doesn't throw punches in combination. He doesn't throw kicks as part of a combination. He just throws one strike at a time. That's it. He's not really a guy that's going to go out there and he's going to hide a kick behind a jab, or he's going to throw a 1-2 and then finish with a leg kick, that sort of situation. He's just going to go out there and throw kicks or punches just blindly. And we saw him get shut down by Nedor when Nedor went out there and just pressured him. And that's Karl Albertsson's game. Karl Albrektsson, I will admit, I have overrated him a lot in the past. I did pick him to win these matchups, and he lost these matchups, but he does have a win over Dovlet's son, Yagshi Muradov, somehow, who won the World Championships, and he also, I believe, holds a very early win over Vadim Nemkov as well. But Albrektsson, he's a pressure fighter. He likes to come forward. He boxes pretty well, and he does shoot for takedowns. Simeon Powell struggles against guys that are going to pressure him, and that's what Albertsson's going to do. The problem with Albrektsson is, though, if you can find this fight against Chuck Campbell knocked him out, and he didn't just really knock him out, man. He knocked down and rocked Albrektsson in multiple different situations in that fight before the finish, and it's a bad KO loss to take only 5 months ago, now going in there against a power puncher. I like Powell to win this one by KO. I think that it is a bad stylistic matchup for Powell, but the fact that Albrektsson just got KO'd very recently, that's not going to be good for Albrektsson. I think that Powell can get it done and move on to the next round of this event. Now, Antonio Carlos Jr. is back. He's taking on Karl Moore. Of course, if you guys do or don't know ACJ, he was a bit of a staple, I guess you could say, of the UFC's light heavyweight division. Fought for the promotion 12 times, was on a win streak, then lost a couple of fights in a row, and then just went out of nowhere and did the Rob Wilkinson. He won the World Championships and the $1 million, and then after that, he just went out there and he decided to do a bit of Brazilian reality TV. That didn't go very well. If you know, you know. If you don't know, just Google it. But let's just say ACJ didn't do super well on the show. So he come back to the PFL, and I'll be honest, he didn't look that good. He does have a pretty good win on the comeback win over Simon Biong, but Simon Biong is a very talented fighter, but like that's kind of it, you know. He doesn't really have much more aside from just pure natural talent. And then Alex Polizzi, you know, is a guy that, being a grappler, you probably should be able to beat. Karl Moore's also a grappler, but the thing about Karl Moore is, out of the two guys, I think that Karl Moore is so much less desperate to get the fight down to the ground. I have seen Moore go out there recently and fight for, 10 minutes plus in a fight before even attempting a takedown, even if it is against a guy that he could potentially get the takedowns against, because he believes in his striking. His striking has been coming along quite well. He does use his range very well, 75-inch reach with a 6'3" frame at this weight class, and he fights behind a jab pretty consistently. He fights behind length, he fights behind head kicks, leg kicks, I should say, sorry, and the takedown defense is good. He just fought Corey Anderson, who's a very talented fighter from, of course, the UFC and Bellator, and a good wrestler. And despite Anderson, yes, taking down Karl Moore on a couple of occasions, Moore's takedown defense held up for a very significant portion of that fight, and also held up relatively well against our boy, Karl Albrektsson, in that fight there, and of course, Moore ended up choking him out. But I think that in this matchup, Moore's takedown defense is going to be good enough to keep ACJ in striking. ACJ's BJJ is fantastic. It is amazing. But aside from that, he doesn't really offer too much. I don't think he offers too much in the striking, and I don't think he offers too much in the wrestling. So I like Karl Moore to go out there and win a decision here just by being the more well-rounded fighter, and Moore is minus 135 right now. And now we can move up to that co-main event of the evening. This is Valentin Moldavsky taking on Sergey Bilostenniy. And I will admit, this is actually a pretty tough stylistic matchup for Valentin Moldavsky, who I think you could make a pretty fair argument who could be the one that wins the whole tournament. I know that he's coming off a loss to Linton Vassell, but I personally thought that he beat Linton Vassell in that matchup. You know, I mean, the stats never tell the full story, but Moldavsky significantly outlanded Linton Vassell in that fight, and also controlled pretty significant portions on that fight as well in the wrestling. So that was kind of interesting. The way that Moldavsky kind of, I guess, let that fight go from him, though, was that he did actually end up getting reversed quite a lot by Vassell, but he was pretty active on the feet. I guess we'll just move on from that fight, because Moldavsky, he's been a staple of 265 pounds now at Bellator for quite a while now, but he's never really been able to quite make it to the top. He's never been able to really be the champion. I think that is Linton Vassell's fault, let's be honest, because Vassell's beaten him a couple of times now, but he is a very well-rounded guy. He is going to shoot for takedowns in this matchup, but I think that maybe for the first time in a while in Moldavsky's career, he's actually going to be at a bit of a striking disadvantage. Sergey Bilostenniy is a very dynamic, a very fast striker, and Bilostenniy isn't just kind of like a regular heavyweight striker. This guy, I mean, he's got a spinning wheel kick victory recently, the spinning back kick, I should say, sorry, against Kasim Miraz. That was pretty insane. And then since then, he's gone on a pretty good run with a heel hook victory in his rematch against Tyrell Fortune, which he would have won if he just wasn't pounding the back of Tyrell Fortune's head in the finish. The thing about him, though, is that I will admit, I thought prior to Bellator, he didn't look that good. This fight against Fernando Rodriguez Jr. was able to clinch Bilostenniy for a very significant amount of that fight, and he did show a bit of a weakness in that matchup, but then he did just beat the clinch master Blagoy Ivanov earlier on last year, of course. But I do think in this matchup, despite this being, I think you could argue, a pretty tough matchup for Moldavsky, I do still like the fact that Moldavsky's striking style does involve a lot of pressure, a lot of moving forward, and also I think something that's going to be significant in this matchup is the takedowns of Moldavsky. And I think something that's worth noting about Moldavsky is every time Moldavsky shoots a takedown, it's usually up against the cage. And we have seen Sergey Bilostenniy, albeit this is in 2022 now, struggle with clinch situations. So I think that Moldavsky can find success in that option there, and I think that he can end up winning a decision over Sergey Bilostenniy. I'm in the minority here, but I do think the betting odds actually do favor me. Yes, they do, because Moldavsky's minus 135, and it seems like it might be trending a little bit wider. But I think that in this one, I've just got to go with the more well-rounded guy, the guy that I do believe is going to be getting the takedowns in this fight. Now we move up to the main event. This fight goes one of two ways. Either Phil Davis goes out there and he just out-wrestles Rob Wilkinson for all 3 rounds, and that's how the fight goes. Or Rob Wilkinson can defend the takedowns, and then he can win the striking. The thing about Rob Wilkinson is, and I'll say this on my channel, but I don't think I'll be as blunt on the We Want Picks channel when I record the video for them. Wilkinson has not looked like the same guy at all since he failed for TRT, for elevated testosterone levels against Thiago Santos in 2023. He obviously won the championships in 2022, looked incredible in that matchup. They come over to 2023, fought Santos. He won that fight using wrestling, of all things, being Rob Wilkinson, a talented kickboxer, and he failed for TRT. And ever since then, he's looked terrible, man. Like, he did knock out Brees, but, you know, Brees was coming off a layoff, and he beat Silveira, but Silveira is a middleweight now, and then Dovletsan Yaghchimuradov just absolutely smoked him. And Wilkinson looked really bad in these 2 fights. He did not look like the same guy that won the championships in 2022. I can tell you that much. And ever since then, you know, the volume of Wilkinson has decreased. He's not throwing anywhere near as many strikes as he used to. He's not shooting for anywhere near as many takedowns as he used to. He's just being so much less active, and it feels like he's almost lost confidence in himself, because it's a shame, because Rob Wilkinson's striking is incredible. He won kickboxing matchups as a professional kickboxer before coming over to the PFL after his UFC run, and it was the kickboxing that got him the $1 million championship, you know? And the thing about Phil Davis is, all Phil Davis does is wrestle. He does have decent boxing. It's okay, but it's not amazing. He really does just throw jabs. Like, he throws a jab every 5 seconds. I'm not even kidding. And that's kind of about it. Phil Davis wants to clinch you up against the cage. He wants to take you down. He wants to knee you, the body up against the cage. Phil Davis fights are really boring. They suck. They really do. They're horrible to watch. But like, if you're picking Phil Davis to win, you're picking Phil Davis to be able to do that to Rob Wilkinson. And I know we just saw him look so bad. This is Wilkinson in his last couple of matchups. The striking advantage is there, and he did out-wrestle Thiago Santos in that fight. It's just, can that takedown defense hold up? I think it can, and I think if it can, Wilkinson is the much, much better striker out of these two. Like, it's not even close. It's just that Wilkinson's volume has just severely decreased. That lowers my confidence in this matchup, but I think that Wilkinson can get it done against Davis. All he really needs to do is defend the takedowns, because that's Phil Davis's entire game. He doesn't really do anything aside from that, and I think that Wilkinson gets it done. And it's amazing how far the fall from grace has become for Wilkinson, because he's only minus 150 in this matchup. I think if this fight took place in 2022, Wilkinson would be a very significant favorite. And that's it for the first round 4 of the matchups of the tournament. I think we're going to have a couple of months of a break for the PFL, and then we'll get into the next round, which is, of course, going to be the semi-finals. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.